Some men do not leave all the way. They just step back far enough to stop giving, while staying close enough to keep seeing you. And that is what makes this one so hard to explain to yourself. Because he is not fully gone. He still watches. You post a story, and his name is there. Not once by accident. Not after 6 months. Not in some random, meaningless way. He watches when you go quiet. He watches when you look good. He watches when you seem happy. Sometimes he is one of the first people there. Sometimes he waits and shows up later, like he wants to remind you he is still around, without actually having to say anything. But he does not text. He does not call. He does not ask how you are. He does not make a plan. He does not say, "I've been thinking about you." He does not do the one thing that would make his attention mean something. And still, part of you feels pulled in. Because passive attention can mess with your head in a very quiet way. It makes you wonder if he misses you. It makes you stare at that tiny name on your screen longer than you want to admit. It makes you think maybe he is nervous. Maybe he is waiting for the right time. Maybe he wants to reach out, but does not know how. Maybe that view means more than silence. So you tell yourself not to overreact. You put the phone down, then you pick it up again 10 minutes later. You check if he watched the second story too. You notice the time. You notice the pattern. You pretend it does not matter, but your mind is already building meaning around a man who has offered you no real words and no real effort. That is the trap. Because being watched can feel a little like being wanted. Not fully, not cleanly, but just enough to keep a question alive in you. And the question is not small. It starts eating into ordinary moments. You are making coffee, and suddenly you are wondering why he looked but said nothing. You are out with friends, and part of your attention is still sitting inside that app. You start reading silence like it is body language. You start treating scraps of visibility like proof of care. But a man watching you from a distance is not the same as a man showing up in your life. That difference matters more than most women let themselves admit at first. Because this kind of man often knows how to stay present in just the right shallow way. Enough to keep his place in your mind. Not enough to take a real place in your life. So no, you are not crazy for noticing it. You are not making it up. And you are not weak because it gets under your skin. A man who keeps looking without reaching out is creating confusion on purpose, or benefiting from it either way. And once you really see that, you start understanding that his attention is not the same thing as his intention. What makes this painful is that it looks like interest from the outside. If a man keeps watching your stories, checking your page, liking something after weeks of silence, or suddenly appearing online right after you post, it is very easy to believe he still cares in a real way. Because real interest and passive attention can look similar for a second. Both involve awareness, both involve focus, both can make you feel seen. But they are not the same thing. A man who truly wants a place in your life does not stay hidden behind views, likes, and quiet watching. He reaches. He risks something. He sends the text. He asks to see you. He speaks clearly enough that you do not have to study his online behavior like it is a puzzle. The man who only watches is doing something much weaker than that. He is staying emotionally cheap. He wants access without effort. He wants to look without having to explain himself. He wants to keep the door cracked without walking through it. And sometimes he wants to know whether you are still open to him without having to offer you anything first. So while you are checking who saw your story, he may be checking something too. Are you still available? Do you still look warm toward him? Would you respond if he came back? Did someone else replace him? Do you still leave little signs that he matters to you? That is why this kind of watching often gets stronger when you start pulling away. You post less, and suddenly he is there. You stop reacting to him, and now he likes an old photo. You begin getting your footing back, and somehow his name pops up again, just enough to disturb your peace. Not because he is ready, not because he suddenly became clear, and not because he has a real plan. Usually it is because distance makes him curious, not committed. And that is an important difference. Curiosity says, "Let me look." Care says, "Let me show up." One costs almost nothing. The other asks a man to be honest, direct, and consistent. A lot of men are willing to do the first one. Far fewer are willing to do the second. That is why passive attention can keep a woman emotionally tied to a man who is barely moving. She sees that he is still there in some form. She feels the small jolt every time his name appears. And because something is happening, she tells herself the story is not over. But sometimes the story is over. He just does not want to fully disappear from your sight. And that is where the confusion starts turning into self-betrayal. Because now you are giving emotional weight to a man who is offering digital crumbs and calling it presence. A man can watch you without wanting to build anything with you. That is the part many women do not want to accept at first, because it sounds colder than what they hoped was true. But this kind of man is not confused in the way you think he is. He may be curious. He may feel a pull. He may remember you at night. He may wonder who you are with. He may even feel something when he sees you looking good, smiling, going out, living your life. But feeling something is not the same as deciding something. And that is where women get hurt. Because you are looking at his attention and thinking, there has to be a reason. There is a reason. It is just not always a loving one. Sometimes he watches because you still matter to his ego. Sometimes he watches because he liked having access to you. Sometimes he watches because he does not want to lose the option of you, even though he has no intention of being the man you would need. Sometimes he watches because distance lets him enjoy the feeling of you without the responsibility of you. That last part matters, because real contact asks more from a man. If he texts you, now he has to say something real. If he calls you, now he has to hear your voice and feel the weight of what he has not done. If he asks to see you, now he has to bring clarity, effort, and follow through. And if he knows he cannot or will not do that, staying at a distance becomes the easiest position. So he watches. He hides inside low-risk behavior, a quick view, a random like, a name appearing at the top of your story list. Enough to feel present, not enough to be accountable. And from his side, this can feel convenient. He gets to check whether you are still emotionally reachable. He gets a glimpse of your life. He gets the comfort of not being fully forgotten. And he does all of that without having to face your disappointment, your questions, or his own inconsistency. That is why passive attention often has very little courage in it. It is not bold. It is not sincere. It is not strong. It is often a man trying to stay emotionally fed from a distance, not fully involved, not fully gone, just present enough to keep a quiet hold on your mind. And the hard truth is this: a man can miss your presence and still not choose you. A man can think about you and still not come forward. A man can watch every story you post and still not be willing to give you anything solid. So the watching does mean something, but not necessarily what your heart wants it to mean. Sometimes it simply means he wants to keep seeing you, without having to show up for you. This is usually where you start turning his silence against yourself. Not out loud at first. Quietly. You see his name watching you again, and your mind starts filling in the blanks. Maybe he thinks I made this too hard. Maybe I came on too strong. Maybe I should have stayed lighter. Maybe he is still watching because he cared, and I ruined it somewhere. Maybe if I had said less, asked for less, reacted less, he would have come closer. So now, you are not just dealing with his distance. You are also carrying a private case against yourself. You replay old messages. You reread the last conversation. You think about that one night you sounded hurt. That one morning you took longer to reply. That one moment you asked where this was going. You start treating your normal human needs like they were the problem. Meanwhile, he is still doing almost nothing. That is what makes this pattern so unfair. A woman can end up doing all the emotional labor for a man who is barely lifting a finger. He watches. She analyzes. He stays quiet. She searches for meaning. He keeps his distance. She starts questioning her worth. And once self-blame gets involved, passive attention becomes even more powerful. Because now every view feels loaded. If he watches but does not reach out, maybe he is disappointed in me. If he watches late at night, maybe he misses me, but thinks I do not want him. If he skips one story and watches the next 3, maybe he is trying to tell me something. No, that is what confusion does. It makes you read intention into behavior that still has no real effort behind it. And women do this especially when the beginning felt real. When he used to text first. When he used to stay up talking to you. When he once made you feel chosen. When he looked eager, open, present. That memory stays alive. So when his distant attention continues, you keep connecting it to the man he was at the start. But the man at the start is not the one shaping your life now. The man shaping your life now is the one who watches without speaking, the one who appears without offering, the one who keeps himself visible while leaving you alone with all the uncertainty. That is not a small thing, because little by little it trains you to abandon your own common sense. You begin measuring hope by activity instead of action. You begin feeling guilty for wanting clarity. You begin acting like his silence is deep, when sometimes it is just silence. And none of that means you are foolish. It means you cared, and your mind tried to make sense of behavior that does not deserve that much interpretation. But the more you blame yourself for a man who only watches, the more you protect him from being seen clearly. And once you stop doing that, everything starts to change. What keeps this pattern alive is not just what he does, it is what it does to you. Because passive attention creates a very specific kind of hope. Not strong hope, not happy hope. Just enough hope to keep you emotionally unsettled. You are not moving forward, but you are not fully letting go either. So your day gets split in half. Part of you is trying to live your life. The other part is still watching the watcher. You tell yourself you are done checking. Then you post something and wait a little longer than usual before closing the app. You hate that you notice his name so fast, but you do. You hate that your chest drops a little when he watches and says nothing, but it does. You hate that a tiny sign from a man giving you almost nothing can still reach inside you that quickly. That is the emotional cost, not just missing him, not just wanting answers, but slowly becoming tied to a pattern that keeps waking up your hope and disappointing it in the same breath. Because every time he watches without reaching out, he reopens something without resolving it. It is like hearing a knock at the door and finding no one there. At first it surprises you, then it unsettles you. After a while, it exhausts you. And the worst part is how invisible that exhaustion can be. Other people do not always see it. They just see that nothing is happening. But something is happening. You are editing messages you never send. You are checking the time he viewed your story. You are wondering whether posting less will make him text. You are wondering whether posting happy photos makes him jealous. You are wondering whether silence is the wrong move, whether softness is the wrong move, whether you are somehow one perfect response away from making him become clear. That is where this starts draining a woman, because she is investing emotional thought into a man who is not investing emotional courage into her. And after a while, the pain is not only about him, it is also about what this does to your sense of self. You start feeling needy for wanting directness. You start feeling dramatic for being affected by something small. You start talking yourself out of your own pain, because technically he did not say anything cruel. But absence with just enough visibility can be cruel in its own way, because it keeps touching the wound without taking responsibility for it. And that is why this can hurt more than a clean ending. A clean ending lets your body settle. This does not. This keeps you in a quiet state of alert, still noticing, still wondering, still half-braced for a message that never comes. After a while, you start seeing that this is not hesitation. It is maintenance. He is maintaining a quiet line to you, not a real relationship. Not real repair, not real effort, just enough contact from a distance to make sure he is not completely gone from your mind. That is why this pattern can go on for months. A story view here, a random like there. Maybe he reacts to one photo and disappears again. Maybe he watches everything for 2 weeks, then vanishes, then shows up again the second you start looking steady without him. It can feel unpredictable, but the deeper pattern is actually very simple. He does not want the responsibility of being close, but he does not fully want the reality of losing access either. So he creates a middle space, a space where he can still look at you, still check your mood, still see whether your life has moved on, still remind you of himself without having to give you a conversation, an apology, a decision, or a plan. And once you see that, a lot of things begin to make sense. Why he never says enough. Why his attention comes in little flashes. Why you keep feeling stirred up but never secure. Why every sign from him creates motion in you, while nothing actually changes between you. Because this was never designed to move forward. It was designed to stay unresolved. That is what passive men often do when they do not have the courage to step in and do not have the discipline to step away. They hover. They keep a light hand on the door, not because they are building something real, but because they still want emotional access to a woman they are not willing to properly hold. And that realization can be painful because it strips away the romance from something you wanted to believe was meaningful. But it also frees you. Because once you stop calling this mixed signals and start calling it what it is, you stop over-respecting behavior that has done nothing but keep you emotionally available to confusion. He is not slowly making his way back. He is not showing up in the only form he can. He is not loving you quietly from afar in some deep, tortured way. He is staying present in the cheapest form possible. And the more clearly you see that, the less powerful his watching becomes. And if you are honest, there were probably moments when you already knew this. Not because you had proof, because your body kept noticing what your hope kept trying to soften. You noticed that he never moved things forward. You noticed that his attention always stayed safer online than in real life. You noticed that he could watch you for weeks, but somehow never find the courage to send one clear message. You noticed that he liked being near your life more than he liked showing up inside it. But you kept giving those signs a softer meaning. You told yourself maybe he needed time. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he was going through something. Maybe the watching meant he cared more than he knew how to say. And I understand why you did that. Because the truth you were avoiding was harder. A man who wants to speak usually speaks, A man who wants to see you usually finds a way. A man who is genuinely afraid but serious still moves in your direction somehow. Maybe clumsy, maybe imperfect, but forward. This man did not move forward. He stayed where the risk was low, behind the screen, behind the view, behind the small sign that made you feel his presence without giving you his intention. And deep down, you saw that. You saw it the night you put your phone face down and still felt yourself thinking about whether he had watched yet. You saw it when he appeared again after silence, and instead of feeling peace, you felt that familiar tightness in your chest. You saw it when one tiny notification changed your mood more than it should have. You saw it when you realized you were getting signs from him, but never relief. That matters, because women often ignore the most important clue of all. Real interest brings you closer to clarity. False interest keeps you close to confusion. And your confusion was not random. It was information. It was showing you that his attention had no safe place for you to land. So this was never about you failing to decode him correctly. It was about you feeling the truth, then talking yourself out of it because the truth felt too disappointing. The shift begins when you stop asking, "What does his watching mean?" and you start asking, "What is this doing to me?" That is the better question, because now the focus comes back to reality. Not his possible feelings, not his private thoughts, not the fantasy that maybe one day he will finally turn passive attention into real action. Just the truth of what this has been costing you. It has been keeping part of your mind occupied. It has been making you check your phone with that quiet tension in your chest. It has been making you feel chosen for a second, then dropped again without a word. It has been teaching you to treat almost contact like something meaningful, when deep down you know it has brought you no peace at all. And once you really face that, something inside you starts to settle, because you no longer need to decode his behavior in the most flattering way possible. You can just call it what it is. He is watching. He is not reaching out. He is staying visible without being present. And whatever he feels, it is still not becoming action. That last part is the part that protects you. Because a woman loses herself when she keeps giving emotional value to what a man might mean instead of what he is actually doing. And what he is actually doing here is very small. He is looking. That is all. No plan, no clarity, no repair, no effort you can lean on. Just enough attention to stir your emotions, not enough care to hold them. So the shift is not anger. It is not proving anything. It is not posting less, posting more, trying to make him jealous, or trying to appear untouched. The shift is quieter than that. It is when his name stops feeling like a message. It is when you see a view and do not build a future around it. It is when you stop turning his silent presence into evidence that he belongs in your life. It is when you understand that being noticed is not the same as being valued. And that is where your power starts coming back. Not in making him act, in no longer letting his non-action control your emotional state. So let this be the truth that brings you back to yourself. A man who watches you is not the same as a man who chooses you. He may be curious. He may be nostalgic. He may like seeing that you are still there. He may even feel a quiet pull every time your face appears on his screen. But none of that changes your life. Because your life is not built on who watches. It is built on who shows up, who speaks, who follows through, who does not leave you staring at a phone, trying to squeeze meaning out of silence, who does not keep touching your attention without offering you any real place to rest. And that is why you do not need to hate him to let this go. You do not need one last message. You do not need to prove that you saw what he was doing. You do not need to post differently, act colder, or turn yourself into a woman who pretends none of this affected her. You just need to become honest about what this is. He was present enough to disturb you, not present enough to love you well. That is all. And once you accept that, his watching starts losing its weight. Because now when his name appears, you see it for what it is. A look, not a step. A sign of awareness, not a sign of character. A small act of attention from a man who still has not done the one thing that matters. Reached. So let him watch. And you keep moving in the direction of what is real. Toward the kind of man who does not hide behind late-night views, random likes, and quiet hovering. Toward the kind of man who does not make you decode his presence. Toward the kind of man whose interest sounds like words, looks like effort, and feels like peace. That is the difference. Not who keeps an eye on you, who has the courage to come closer,